presents on a weekly geeky blog. I am your host and writer behind 99geek.ca, Andrew Geczy. As primarily a fiction writer, releasing chapters of my books and weekly chunks on my Patreon, like episodes of TV shows when I'm not trying to make ends meet in what feels like a poverty nightmare, I wanted my brand, 99% Geek, to offer more than just my writing, pulling from my many interests and passions. I don't have much to offer in the way of talent besides my writing, but I'm passionate about pop culture and try to keep myself as up to date on politics, science, and art as I can. Being a huge TV nerd, I run down the best shows of the week, go over all the major news headlines for people who have maybe gotten too tired to follow regular news, breaking it down and explaining it for people who might feel unable to follow along. And before anything else, I spotlight something cool and geeky for the week. Remember, you can follow along by going to 99geek.ca. This is Geekly Weekly number 102 for the week of Saturday, June 12th. And this week's highlight is E3. That's right. For those who don't follow video games quite like I do, or even those who love video games but maybe don't follow the news of the behind the scenes of them, there's this huge expo event going on right now called Electronic Entertainment Expo. And It's literally just begun. If you're watching the video stream of this and not watching it later or listening to it later in podcast, you can see that I have literally attached the schedule to the list. We're recording this in between the beginning of the expo and the Ubisoft, which is the first major conference starting at 3 p.m. Who knows what they're going to reveal at the Ubisoft? So that's, I believe, in 50 minutes or something like that. I had a countdown there, but I lost it in the corner. But so we have that long to go through the Geekly Weekly. What can I quickly say about E3? Um, it used to be the place where companies have gone to announce their biggest games and sometimes even consoles. Over the past few years, E3 has dropped in both popularity and relevance. A lot of big names realize that they can save a lot of money by hosting their own events instead, and then they don't have to compete with others for headlines. This has been largely considered a good direction that the industry has gone in. However, this year, with the pandemic, there are a lot of forces trying to make E3 an event as big as it used to be. Big names have joined up to show stuff, and also this is happening at a very specific time when we're entering a new generation, and for the most part, no one knows what's coming out in this new generation. Very little of what's on the horizon has been revealed at all yet, and a lot of it is very much on the verge of being revealed. So a lot of people are anticipating huge things from this E3, and I suppose I talk more about that. I can talk about more about that next week when we see what those huge things are. Until then, though, you can tune in on Twitch or YouTube or just wherever and enjoy the show. Or by wherever I mean, you can just tune in like GameSpot later and like see the bullet points of like, oh, this is everything that got announced, and then watch whatever trailers that people highlight and shit. There's tons of good stuff though. Let's go over that quickly. Ubisoft again is starting in like 45 minutes. Devolver Digital, they often have good Devolver Digital, Gearbox often have great games. I don't know much about Games Beat. Upload VR Showcase is probably just going to showcase a bunch of different VR games that could be really cool to look at. Don't know much about 24 Entertainment. Microsoft and Bethesda obviously is going to be huge. That's the one I'm almost most excited for. But Square Enix is going to be exciting too. These two are like that's the one you can't miss. From 1 p.m. Eastern to 3:15, to whenever. I guess 3:15 it's the second thing, but I mean those two are the ones you don't want to miss. A lot of people are saying good things about the PC gaming show. Um, so that's interesting. Future Games Show, I don't know what that is, but might be worth checking out. Warner Bros. Games Back for Blood is it's going to be the next Left 4 Dead sort of thing. That's going to be showcased at 5 on Sunday. On Monday, we have Take Two. I don't know what Verizon is up to. I also don't really know what Intellivision is up to that I would care about. But there's Take Two, there's Capcom, Tuesday, Nintendo. Yeah, well, see, so you don't have to watch it all, but I mean, you can tune into whatever interests you and see what's going on and skip the rest. That's the schedule for E3. Um, clearly it's, like there's a lot of stuff, but it's not all going to be like super Bandai Namco. It's not all going to be huge, super headlining news. I just watched one that was like wholesome games. That's not like a genre. That's an actual company called Wholesome Games, I guess. And the kind of funny crew were going on about how cute and awesome the games looked, but to me it was just like, oh look, it's a rip-off of Animal Crossing. Oh look, it's a rip-off of Mario Party. Oh look, it's a rip-off of, but with cute other animals, and it's like whatever. So like, I mean, it's not all gonna be like mind-blowing reveals every 5 minutes for the next 4 days straight. And E3 was never like that. There were a few years where it was just like insanity. And I used to remember those years. E3 used to be a big deal. It used to be one of my most look forward to weeks of the year when I was younger. Hopefully this year has some good stuff. But moving on from there to the Geekly Weekly TV rankings, where we're ranking all of the shows I watch, so you know how best to use your TV watching time. I can't read. It's fine. Everything's fine. Remember, you can get my instant reactions to these shows and more by following me at Andrew Geczy, that's AndrewGeczy, on Twitter. Starting at the bottom, there are 9 shows this week that I watched. The Flash was the worst one. It was a terrible episode of the show. I actively hated it. Large swaths of it anyway. I gave it 2 stars in the end, and I don't even know why I'm giving it 2 stars. I guess certain scenes made me nostalgic for a time when I liked the show and the characters had things to do that I cared about. I hated everything with Barry and Frost putting on a brave face. I hated everything with everything. Just every scene and every storyline was garbage. Kind of wanted to give up on the show after this episode, even after I came back for Superman and Lois, and they actually had a great week this week. So there you go. Sometimes you think you're ready to give up on the show, and then they end up fixing their shit, sort of, but not really. Number 8 on the list, Star Wars: The Bad Batch. There's a really big drop off where like garbage number 9, number 8, actually pretty good. I enjoyed this episode. It was a good episode, perfectly fine. I can't think of a single real flaw, besides that there wasn't really anything to it. They met Rex, they got their chips removed. There was no real hijinks or depth. That's not really a summary so much as a detailed point by point plot retelling. That's all that happens. Wrecker goes a little loopy and people run from him for 5 minutes, but it really just felt like, yep, things happened. I at no point didn't enjoy myself. I also at no point enjoyed myself necessarily, besides laughing at Omega's accent as usual. My interest was maintained. I actually have absolutely no problem with episodes like this. I love just existing in the world of Star Wars. I cherish all my time in Star Wars, and I'd happily take a new Star Wars episode every day, even if 90% of them were nothing burgers like this episode. I just can't in good conscience give it a higher than 3.5 stars. Come to think of it, the episode might have been shallow because of how long we spent in that bar at the beginning, but that was my favorite part of the episode, so I wouldn't change a thing. Some episodes just have to be lesser than others for the sake of the story. So that was Star Wars: The Bad Batch with 3.5 stars, proving that most of these episodes were probably pretty good. Hacks was number 7 on the list with 4 stars. These last 2 episodes made for a pretty good finale. My favorite part was absolutely the agent and his assistant. Absolutely hilarious assistant. I love her. I've known people like her in real life, and she's just so goddamn funny. The 2 of them in Vegas had me dying. I also enjoyed most everything else, but I did feel some of the stuff surrounding her, Jean Smart's final show dragged on and on and on. And the drama surrounding it dragged on and on and on. And the drama of Ava's job interview was too much. Just too much. But it was fun and enjoyable despite being frustrating, which is a pretty good summation for the show as a whole. Moving on to number 6 on the list, keeping the speed fast because we've got 45 minutes. Legends of Tomorrow with 4 stars number 6. This was a fun episode focusing on Astra for the first time this season. For the first half of the episode, I was actually enjoying it and would have gone so far as to call it my favorite episode of the season. I do feel like once she released the guy from the painting, it became a little predictable in plot, even if the shenanigans were still crazy and random and silly and fun. In the end, I didn't love everything about this episode, like most episodes this season, but I loved enough to keep me enthusiastic throughout. Turning the legends into inanimate objects, and then the whole show turning into a Disney animation, was fun and silly. There were few moments in this episode when I wasn't at least having fun, so that has to be worth something. 4 stars, apparently. Number 5 on the list is Batwoman, also with 4 stars. Lots of 4 stars this week. This was a good episode of Batwoman this week, delving into police corruption and even police abolishment. We had very powerful scenes with nearly every character, and while Alice's thing with Seabiscuit, or whatever his name is, continues to be shoved in our face, I can't trust him anymore. He killed that woman because of brainwashing, and like everyone else, he is going to betray Alice. I do like her teaming up with her dad, though. And I liked everything with Batwoman trying to prove Luke's innocence and then have to abandon it all to save the dad. I even liked Luke deciding that he would rather die than continue to live in our shitty world and then finding out that's not how it works. While none of it was perfectly executed, it was strong ideas that largely succeeded at landing, making for a strong and consistent episode. Far more consistent than Legends of Tomorrow, which might have otherwise been more fun. Number 4 on the list. Superman and Lois, with 4 stars as well. This was a great episode of Superman and Lois, maybe my favorite episode yet. Jordan was the least whiny he's ever been, despite having good reason to whine for once, and the storyline with the secret behind Smallville that Lois is trying to uncover really came to a tense front in a big way. I enjoyed the consequences of the kryptonite gas last week. I enjoyed the storyline with Jordan's hot friend, and I enjoyed the slow reveals, spelled horribly wrong, but I will, of the different people being possessed. I knew Lana's husband was one of them, but it didn't make the late reveal any less exciting. That was Superman and Lois at number 4, and now we are at the top 3 shows of the week. Bum ba da 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 dum bum bum bum. Loki at number 3, surprisingly, because I would have expected that to be at number 1, but it wasn't. With 4 stars. This first episode was fun and silly. I predicted the final reveal in the first moments of the episode, but that didn't make the journey not fun. It did drone on a little bit, not much mind, like I'm being critical, but this first episode very much stood on the charisma of Loki, and besides Tom Hiddleston's charisma and some cool world building, I actually didn't find much depth to this first episode. I know it's setting up what will be a fun romp, and I had fun during the setup, but the setup wasn't extraordinary or did anything super mind-blowing or really even worked all the time. It worked sometimes, and it did its job fine. But again, it felt just not quite the firing on all cylinders yet. Just a setup, but we'll see. That was Loki at the 3rd spot. Number 2 on the list is a new show called We Are Lady Parts, and this one got 4.5 stars, so it's better than Loki. This was great. It was a lot of fun and silly and over the top and hilariously dramatic and angsty and Scott Pilgrim-esque, but with the very unique viewpoint of a UK Muslim in the UK. It's very punk, and honestly the idea of punk angst Muslims was enough to draw me in, and I love it. It's giving me everything I want and then some. It's interesting seeing their culture from their perspective, but it also manages to be funny and grounded and a good time. I believe in the UK the entire first season has already aired, but in Canada they only just aired the first 2 episodes. So like I was doing with MODOK earlier, I'll treat it as such. Hopefully I keep watching this longer than I did MODOK. That show got boring fast. This one, I imagine, should keep my attention. That was We Are Lady Parts at the number 2 spot. But the number 1 spot, just barely I think this week, was Fear the Walking Dead with 4.5 stars. This was a really strong, intense episode of the show. I've heard some people actually disagree. A bunch of the podcasts I listened to were very negative on it, calling it dumb. But I thought it was pretty good. I was on the edge of my seat, wondering who they were going to kill, and they ended up not killing either of them. Possibly this was even one of the best episodes of the show. Morgan and Strand having to fight their way through a submarine of walkers to try to stop a nuclear missile launch was powerful and intense, and full of so many moments where I was convinced one of them would die. It ended in an interesting place as well, with us unsure what's going to happen with the launched nuke. That said, I do get a little frustrated with the way they treat radiation. They keep using it as a source for tension, but it might as well be magic or a writer's deus ex machina. Because it doesn't really matter how many rads these characters take. The writers can just be like, nah, they're fine. They die of cancer in 40 years, and that's it, not a thing. Or they could die of radiation poisoning the very next day. It's like all up to the writers, and nothing that we see will change that. But that was a small nitpick from an otherwise awesome episode. Moving on from there to the Geekly predictions. These are new releases people will be talking about around the water cooler over the next week. Starting at the top, iCarly is coming to Paramount Plus on Thursday. I don't know if that includes Paramount Plus in Canada because we don't seem to get anything from Paramount. But hopefully we'll be able to get her somewhere because it's iCarly and it's finally back and you should get excited. Or don't. I'm not going to make you or anything. I learned about a new show that I've never heard of before called Tuca and Birdie coming to Adult Swim Sunday. This is season 2 of Tuca and Birdie. Apparently there is a season 1 already on Netflix, but they canceled it and then Adult Swim picked it up, but they're not allowed to air the first season. It's a whole thing. It looks weird. You can watch the trailer. The link is of course here. Might be up your alley. I'm probably not gonna watch it, but it looked cool. I think Tiffany Haddish is a toucan bird or something. I don't know. Anyway, The Hitman's Wife's Bodyguard is number 3 on that list. It's coming to theaters on Wednesday. There really wasn't a whole lot coming out this week. These are the only 3 things I predicted. It's already getting bad reviews from critics, but seems to have an audience of people who insist that the first one was actually really funny. Also, I saw people who watched the first one and were begging why would anyone make a sequel. I guess they enjoyed it, but thought that any sequel would be terrible. But from watching the trailer, it seems to me the actors are just having a lot of fun, especially Salma Hayek. I could totally see this as Salma Hayek and Sam Jackson hanging out in real life and realizing they wanted to make a movie together and made this. And therefore, whether it's good or bad, if the actors are enjoying themselves, then it's at worst an offensive fun. Honorable mentions. Things that don't make this list, like continuing shows of quality or nonfiction content. I guess Zoe Deschanel is teaming up with Michael Bolton to bring back The Dating Game. I can't remember what day that was coming out, but I don't think you should care. This time, normal people get to vie for the chance to date a minor celebrity. It looks terrible, but I'll be on it if you need some more contestants for season 2, Zoe. I'm here. I'd love to date a celebrity. I think I would get along well with a big personality. It's just what I'm saying. Moving on, Elder Scrolls Online is getting a next-gen upgrade, and from what I've seen, it's actually a big increase. So much so, it makes me want to dive in. So if you've been wanting to check out an MMO, but you've never really dabbled your toes in, Elder Scrolls might be a great place to start. It's pretty much free on Xbox because it comes with Game Pass. Um, and it's a huge MMO, and it's a big world, and it's going to be really pretty on the next-gen consoles. Um, could be worth checking out. There's also I'll talk about that next week. Moving on from there. If I miss anything, by the way, feel free to point it out in the comments so others can know to check it out. Nobody told me that I missed Ratchet and Clank last week, I believe. I don't know how I missed Ratchet and Clank. I don't know if it wasn't on the list I usually check or what happened, but I'll be honest, I don't really care too much about Ratchet and Clank anyway. They're fine, they're cool. I've played the first game and never really loved it. So yeah, Ratchet and Clank. I would love to play through the series and give it another chance, and I imagine it's better than I'm giving it credit for. And apparently, it's one of the few games that really takes advantage of the PS5, where you can like see, oh, this is what next gen is going to look like. So you can check that out if you're a Ratchet and Clank fan. Moving on from there to the Geekly Weekly News headlines. It's news from the past week you need to know so you won't be as ignorant as a QAnon loser. Starting at the top, there's not too many stories this week. Maybe more than I was expecting, actually, but not too many. Time ticking away. Democrats face wrenching test on agenda. This is a story by the Associated Press, Lisa Mascaro of the Associated Press on June 7, 2021, out of Washington, D.C. Bracing for political trouble, Senate Majority Leader Chuck Schumer warned Democratic colleagues that June will test our resolve as senators return Monday to consider infrastructure, voting rights, and other stalled-out priorities at a crucial moment in Congress. 6 months into the party's hold on Washington, with Joe Biden in the White House and Democrats controlling the House and Senate, there is a gloomy uncertainty over their ability to make gains on campaign promises. As Democrats strain to deliver on Biden's agenda, the limits of bipartisanship in the 50-50 Senate are increasingly clear. Talks over an infrastructure package are teetering because they can't even agree with that on how to do basic infrastructure. Though Biden is set to confer again on Monday with the lead GOP negotiator, and an ambitious elections overhaul bill is essentially dead now that Senator Joe Manchin announced his opposition Sunday. That's a Democrat senator. So basically, they had a plan to overhaul the elections, and all it needed was for every Democrat to say yes, and they'd be able to push it through the hard way. But because one Democrat was like, you know what? I'm not sure about this. They're like, well, we're fucked. We literally needed everyone because guess what? The GOP know how to get everyone in line, and they're always, all of them are just like in step. And when they're not, they get kicked out of the party, right? Like, isn't that exactly what happened to Liz Cheney? We need to move the ball, says Yvette Simpsons, CEO of Democracy of America, a liberal advocacy group. A liberal advocacy group. Thank you. I know how to speak words. We told everyone to come out against all odds in the pandemic and vote, she said about the 2020 election. The promise was that with Democrats in power, we're going to have all these great things happen. Their lives are going to be better. And what they're finding is that it looks like Washington is that it is Washington as usual. Which I don't know what you expect. Washington is going to remain. I mean, the issue was that the GOP weren't Washington as usual, right? Like, just for the record, I know it's like, oh my God, liberals are not like bringing the Star Trek future to us tomorrow. But like, for the record, we were voting not to bring about the socialist future. We were voting to not have the fascists get back in power. That's what we were voting for. I don't understand this idea that we're not getting what we're voting for. I think a lot of us are pretty convinced that we are getting what we're voting for. I say in Canada, not having no connection to American politics, but like sometimes keeping conservatives from making things worse is enough. You don't need to always be making things better. It would be nice. I'm not saying I wouldn't love it, but there are worse things that could be happening right now in the past 6 months. The past 6 months could be very different than they have been. I don't even know where I was in this story anymore. The summer work period is traditionally among the busiest for Congress, but Democrats are growing wary because time is running out for Biden to negotiate a sweeping infrastructure package and other priorities are piling up undone. The days ahead are often seen as a last chance of legislating before the August recess and the start of campaigns for next year's elections. Schumer, in setting the agenda, is challenging senators to prepare to make tough choices, but he is also facing a test of his own ability to lead the Big Tent party through a volatile period of shifting priorities and tactics in the aftermath of the Trump era and the Capitol insurrection. While Democratic senators have been generating goodwill by considering bipartisan bills, yeah, we keep trying. In the evenly split Senate, they face mounting pressure from voters who put them in office to fight harder for legislation that Republicans are determined to block with a filibuster. Like, for the record, let's just dive into that again for the 100,000th time. Democratic senators keep trying desperately to work with Republicans and giving in to their demands and like trying to meet them halfway. And every time Republicans are like, no, my way or nothing, my way or nothing. We will block you from doing anything. We will cheat if we have to, blah, 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 blah. And somehow they're both being treated as legitimate parties in government. And I don't understand it. I don't understand why when these people support the insurrection, they aren't removed from office. That's you can't support the takeover of the country and then be allowed to continue working for that country. They're traitors at this point. Like people like Marjorie Taylor Greene and so many other people should be removed from office by police. This should not be a difficult thing. This is insane that they continue to they can stand on a stage and yell about how Hillary Clinton should be arrested for literally nothing, and then they can support insurrection and get away with fucking murder, never be held accountable for anything, and fucking who gives a shit? It's insanity. I'm done with this this article. It's so frustrating. But that's the reality is that like the good guys will always just turn the other cheek, and then the bad guys always be like, see, it's the good guys. They did it all. They're the villains. Superman's a bad guy. I'm Lex Luthor. You can trust me. I hate it. I fucking hate it. And then they do, and they make Lex Luthor president, and he never faces any consequences for his actions, and he gets away with murder. And oh, look at that. City News is in colors. Colors everywhere. Aung San Suu Kyi's lawyers say prosecution starts next week. This is a story from the Associated Press. The time is 2:30. We got time. And this is out of Nay Piata, Myanmar. Myanmar's military junta will begin presenting its case against deposed leader Aung San Suu Kyi in court next Monday, her lawyers say. Well, keep in mind she's done nothing wrong and was arrested against all like against all reason or law by the military because the military didn't like her. The military arrested Suki in February when it overthrew her elected government. Public resistance to the coup remained strong and in recent months has taken the form of a low-level armed insurrection. Government prosecutors will have until June 28th to finish the presentation in the court of Nai Piatah, the capital, where she is being tried on 5 charges, after which Suu Kyi's defense team will have until July 26th to present its case, said Kin Mong Za, the team's senior member. Court sessions are to be held on Monday and Tuesday each week. Kin Mong Za spoke to journalists after procedural hearing on Monday for Suu Kyi and 2 fellow defendants, ousted President Win Myint and former Nai Piatah Mayor Mio Aung. Suu Kyi supporters say the charges against her are politically motivated, obviously, and are meant to discredit her and legitimize the military's takeover. No way! Really? If convicted of any of the offenses, she could be banned from running an election promised by the junta within 1 or 2 years of its takeover. Fuck you. She and her co-defendants are charged with spreading information that could cause public alarm or unrest. Suu Kyi also faces 2 counts of violating the natural disaster management law for allegedly breaking COVID-19 pandemic restrictions during the 2020 election campaign, illegally importing walkie-talkies that were for her bodyguards' use, then licensed use of the radios. Okay. Fuck you again. 6 charges that Suu Kyi faces is the most serious one, breaching the colonial era Official Secrets Act, which carries a penalty of up to 14 years of imprisonment. It has been handled separately from the other charges and was filed in a court in Yangon, the country's biggest city. It was recently transferred to the Union Supreme Court in Nipiata, said San Marlanyunt, another of her lawyers. Another of her lawyers, Min Min So, said that when they met with her, she asked them if they could help pay for her food expenses because their cash resources were low and she did not want to rely on being fed by her captors. That's fucked. It's so fucked. I feel sorry for her. Fuck the military in that country. They can suck a bag of dicks. Let's move on. Carbon dioxide levels hit 50% higher than pre-industrial time. Let's hear a bit more about that, shall we? This is a story by Seth Borenstein of the Associated Press. On June 7th, 2021 at 1:37 p.m. The annual peak of global heat-trapping carbon dioxide in the air has reached another dangerous milestone, 50% higher than when the industrial age began. And the average rate of increase is faster than ever, scientists reported Monday. The National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration said the average carbon dioxide level for May was 419.13 parts per million. That's 1.82 parts per million higher than May 2020 and 50% higher than the stable pre-industrial levels of 280 parts per million, said NOAA North National Oceanic and Atmospheric Administration climate scientist Pieter Tons. Carbon dioxide levels peak every May just before plant life in the northern hemisphere blossoms, sucking some of that carbon out of the atmosphere and into flowers, leaves, seeds, and stems. The reprieve is temporary, though, because emissions of carbon dioxide from burning coal, oil, and natural gas for transportation and electricity far exceed what plants take in, pushing greenhouse gas levels to new records every year. Reaching 50% higher carbon dioxide than pre-industrial is really setting a new benchmark and not in a good way, said Cornell University climate scientist Natalie Mahowald, who wasn't part of the research. If we want to avoid the worst consequences of climate change, we need to work much harder to cut carbon dioxide emissions and right away. Climate change does more than increase temperatures. It makes extreme weather, storms, wildfires, floods, and droughts worse and more frequent and causes oceans to rise and get more acidic, studies show. There are also health effects, including heat deaths and increased pollen. In 2015, countries signed the Paris Agreement to try to keep climate change to below what's considered dangerous levels. The one-year jump in carbon dioxide was not a record, mainly because of La Nina weather patterns. When parts of the Pacific temporarily cool, said Scripps Institution of Oceanography geochemist Ralph Keeling. Keeling's father started the monitoring of carbon dioxide on top of the Hawaiian mountain Mauna Loa in 1958, and he has continued the work charting the now famous Keeling curve. Scripps, which calculates the numbers slightly differently based on time and averaging, said the peak in May was 418.9. Also, pandemic lockdowns slowed transportation, travel, and other activity by about 7%. earlier studies show, but that was too small to make a significant difference. Carbon dioxide can stay in the air for 1,000 years or more, so year-to-year changes in emissions don't register much. The 10-year average rate of increase also set a record, now up to 2.4 parts per million per year. Carbon dioxide going up in a few decades like that is extremely unusual. For example, when the Earth climbed out of the last ice age, carbon dioxide increased by about 80 parts per million, and it took the Earth system, the natural system, 6,000 years. We have a much larger increase in the last few decades. By comparison, it has taken only 42 years from 1979 to 2021 to increase carbon dioxide by that same amount as what took 6,000 years. The road is approaching the point where exceeding the Paris targets and entering a climate danger zone becomes almost inevitable, said Princeton University climate scientist Michael Oppenheimer, who wasn't part of the research. All right, moving on. And the only reason it kept mentioning these people weren't involved in the research was, I think, pointing out that they have no vested interest in lying to you. They're just saying, the shit that their science is telling them. But moving on from there to this ProPublica story that many of the uber rich pay next to no income tax. This was covered everywhere, but I didn't know it was going to be covered everywhere when I attached it to this. So you've probably already heard this already, but let's dive into that a little more, shall we? Not that much more clearly. This is a story by Paul Wiseman of the Associated Press, and this came out June 8th, 2021, out of Washington, D.C. Maybe. The rich really are different from you and me. They're better at dodging the tax, man. Amazon founder Jeff Bezos paid no income tax in 2007 and 2011. Tesla founder Elon Musk's income tax bill came to zero in 2018. And financier George Soros went 3 straight years without paying federal income tax, according to a report out Tuesday from the nonprofit investigative journalism organization ProPublica. Overall, the richest 25 Americans pay less in tax, 15.8% of adjusted gross income, than many ordinary workers do once you include taxes for Social Security and Medicare, ProPublica found. An anonymous source delivered to ProPublica reams of Internal Revenue Service data on the country's wealthiest people, including Warren Buffett, Bill Gates, Rupert Murdoch, and Mark Zuckerberg. ProPublica compared the tax data it received from information available from other sources. It reported that in every instance we were able to check involving tax filings by more than 50 separate people, the details provided to ProPublica matched the information from other sources. Using perfectly legal tax strategies, many of the uber-rich are able to whittle their federal tax bills down to nothing or close to it. Soros went 3 straight years without paying federal income tax. Billionaire investor Carl Icahn, too, ProPublica finds. The findings are sure to heighten the national debate over the vast and widening inequality between the very wealthiest Americans and everyone else. ProPublica reports that the tax bills of the rich are especially low when compared with their soaring wealth, the value of their investment portfolios, real estate, and other assets. Some people are saying that this is because that largely taxes in North America tax labor and not wealth, is what people are saying, which is horrifying in its entirety. Moving on from there. In Nigeria, gas giants get rich as women sink into poverty. This is a story that comes from Vice.com. It's a very interesting picture. By Shola Lawal, June 10th, 2021. For Beauty Alozi, a 28-year-old seamstress and mother of one, the heat in Iboka is not normal. The rural, oil-rich town in Rivers State at the heart of Nigeria's Niger Delta region where Alozi was born and raised is uncomfortably hot. The source of this heat, which has a fume-like quality that stings the eyes, is man-made. Industrial fires continuously spew in a process called gas flaring, the controversial practice of disposing waste gas from oil exploration by openly burning it. That's horrifying. Flares eject ominous dark clouds, releasing harmful greenhouse gases that pollute soil and water sources and contribute to the burden of climate change. It was previously seen as a necessary measure. If the gas from oil drilling is not flared, it could become explosive. It is possible to avoid. Newer, albeit more expensive technologies now allow for the safe capture and transportation of the gas. But they'd still rather just burn it like that. In Ebocha, gas flaring is wreaking havoc on the land and on its people, sinking women, in particular, in financial ruin and food insecurity. Women in Ebocha, who are often breadwinners as well as caretakers, say gas flaring is ruining their bodies, making it that much more difficult to work and support families. Alosi is just one of thousands living close to a gas flare in the Niger Delta. A few hundred meters from Alosi's home is the root of some of her deepest worries. Ebocha's crude oil flow station, operated by Italian oil giant Eni through the local Nigerian Egypt Oil Company subsidiary, or AGIP. Okay, the facility has been active for at least 30 years, well before she was born. A lot of things don't survive here anymore, said Alozi, perched on a plastic seat in front of her house, looking at a neighbor's healthy cassava farm nearby. Alozi thinks it might do poorly come harvest time. The common cassava, because of the flaring, doesn't yield as bountifully as it used to, and the waters are condemned. For decades, Nigeria has made commitments to phase out gas flaring, but in oil-producing Ibocha, where gas flaring is common, trucks of Nigerian soldiers protect the community's two active flaring sites and oil processing tanks that tower like giant frozen robots. Meanwhile, Nigeria has missed two self-imposed deadlines since the turn of the century to stop gas flaring, and after failing to meet a third deadline last year, shifted the goalpost again, this time indefinitely. As international gas companies like Eni and Shell reap millions of dollars off the resources in the region, women here say gas flaring is destroying their lives. Though Ibocha quite literally sits on oil money, the crude has been a curse. I've always been aware of this heat, this gas flaring, ever since I was a child, Alozi said. As much as gas is helpful, the flaring has caused more harm than good in this area. Early in the mornings, tireless women of the Niger Delta push wheelbarrows filled with farming tools. They balance baskets on their heads, wrappers tied around their chests as they set out to till the land. Their skin bears the marks of years of toiling under the baking sun. Here it is women who feed families. In Ebocha, where women have traditionally farmed or fished as breadwinners, the flaring's effects are visible and punishing. On a given day, women on bicycles ramble past a row of flare stacks that look like tall torches of golden flames licking angrily at the sky. Gas released during flaring mixes with water in the atmosphere and causes acid rain. Dark, sooty rainwater that people here say is corrosive, poking huge holes in zinc roofing sheets and killing crops. As more farmlands fall to oil spills and low yield, there is less profit to be made. In Akwuzi, a community close to Ibocha, and where Peace Bathuel, a middle-aged farmer and former spokesperson for a women's collective in Ibocha, grew up, gas leaks have caused explosions and oil spills, destroying women's farms. It's difficult to get good crops from a parcel of land once touched by oil, Bathuel said. The Nikiso River, which flows beneath the town on one end of town and from where women once fetched water, now carries filmy rainbow colors. And that's what that looks like if you're watching the video. It's disgusting. The degraded land sinks women into poverty, according to Idongaset Smart, a project manager of Cache, an NGO helping women organize in the Niger Delta. In recent years, the cost of gari, a starchy flour made from cassava root and a staple in Nigeria, has soared in the region. Many women plant cassava, but they say their yields have been decreasing, although they add it's hard to tell by how much. So many women in the Niger Delta are poor because their source of livelihood has been destroyed, said Smart, who is also from the region, although Rivers State is among the top 15 richest state in the country. Data from Nigeria's statistic agency shows that women living in the rural areas like Ibocha and surviving only on subsistence agriculture are poorer than those in urban areas. In the past, Smart recalled, Gary was plentiful. Recently, she called her mother in search of the root, but she didn't have any cassava from which to make it. Smart said the ones she planted had died. Understandably, the further away from the flares the farmers plant crops, the better the yield will be, according to Robert Onyeneke of the Obonyi State-based Center for Climate Change and Development. The heat from the gas flaring, coupled with acid rain, negatively affects the soil, and crops like cassava can't easily recover. The pollution has driven farmers who can afford to abandon their land to search for more fertile soil in non-flaring communities. An Eni spokesperson from the Italian company rejected blame for environmental damage. NAOC, the Nigerian Egypt oil company Eni's local subsidiary, subsidiary, has a program of continuous monitoring of air quality at its facilities. In line with applicable regulatory requirements, the spokesperson said. Results show that the air quality parameters are within the regulatory limits. Company added has reduced flaring by 92% in the last 14 years and is committed to reducing routine flaring to zero within 2025. Let's not forget they keep apparently pushing those back. Shell Nigeria did not respond to requests for comment, so fuck Shell. But with fewer farmers in the community and soaring inflation rates across Nigeria, food prices in general are increasing, prompting fears of food insecurity. Unemployment is high in Nibocha, especially for women, and the coronavirus pandemic has only made things more dire. Ugh, rough throat. Meanwhile, the cost of living is rising, with Nigeria facing the worst inflation in 4 years. Instead of farming, women like Elozi adopt for other more dependable but historically less profitable or revered professions, like tailoring. She earns roughly $360 a month from sewing dresses for women in Ibocha, which she said is double the earnings of an average farmer. That's horrible. Alozi dreams of leaving Ibocha and Nigeria entirely to join the migration exodus of tens of thousands of countries' young men and women to places like Canada and Europe. Most of her friends have already left Ibocha, she said, to look for jobs in the bustling state capital city, Port Harcourt. Like her, they looked for vocational jobs right after high school instead of pursuing farming or college degrees since there are so few white-collar jobs available. Education is a waste of time, said Alozi. Sometimes when fear takes hold, Alozi picks up her smartphone and Googles how gas flaring harms the human body. But there's not much she can do. Inevitably, she closes the internet tabs one by one. She can't escape the side effects of the flares. Angry red dots cover the insides of her arms, contrasting sharply with her fair skin. It's uncomfortable. It itches, she said. Her baby also has a pink rash, dotting his body. I try not to think about it. It is God that saves most of us here, she said. The rashes are common in the area, as are eye infections, chronic cough, and pneumonia, according to a local nurse at a government hospital who wished to remain anonymous due to fears of reprisal. That's horrible. For pregnant women, it is even worse. I mean, just to speak out about this stuff, people are getting worried about being attacked. In January, a severe strange cough made its way around Ibocha, residents say, sparking fears that both the gas flaring and the COVID-19 pandemic were taking their tolls. Then there are the distressing number of stillbirths, reportedly anecdotally by both the nurse and local women. The Fuller Project and Vice World News could not independently confirm that gas flaring is causing stillbirths due to lack of local research, but the effects of gas flaring have been found to lead to potentially negative outcomes for pregnant women. In Eagle Ford, Texas, women stand a 50% chance of having preterm births, according to researchers at the University of California in Los Angeles. Around the world, countries like Nigeria continue to flare gas despite the known risks and enormous toll it takes on communities and on the environment. Russia flares the most gas, followed by Iraq, Iran, the United States, Algeria, and Venezuela, according to recent World Bank data. Nigeria is the seventh biggest gas flaring country, and I love how we're pointing at them like they're not stopping, and they said they were going to stop. Meanwhile, the U.S. is still doing it, Russia's still doing it, but I mean Russia's just fucking assholes. Nigeria is part of the World Bank's Global Gas Flaring Reduction Partnership, GGFR, a campaign to end flaring by 2030, which the institution says will help mitigate global warming effects. Over the past 15 years, Nigeria has steadily reduced its flaring by some 70%, said Zubin Bamji, the program manager of the World Bank's project. The country has also attempted to outlaw gas flaring and has introduced fines for airing oil companies. Still, these flares make the country one of Africa's biggest polluters. A bill that would penalize the practice except for emergencies has been delayed for more than 10 years. There's more pictures of the horribleness of what's going on here. How much longer is this? It is almost over. Okay, I was going to say. In 2004, through a public-private agreement, the Nigerian Liquefied Natural Gas Project (NLNG), which turns gas and liquids for sale to Middle Eastern and European markets, was launched. The volume of gas flared in ratio to gas produced fell to 10%. The volume of gas flared in ratio to gas produced fell to 10% in 2018, down from 53% in 2002. That's huge. Partly due to the activities of the NLNG and other gas utilization efforts. By the way, those sirens are on my end, not on your end. The police are not attacking you. Don't worry. I'm sure they'll be over in a sec. Maybe not. They seem to be getting louder. Oh my god, they're coming for me. Save yourselves. Don't talk about gas flaring. They will come for you next. But anyway, despite relative progress, gas flare rates have been ticking back up in recent years, according to investigations by Deutsche Welle and data from Nigeria's National Oil Spill Detection and Response Agency. Flaring levels dipped again in 2020, but only due to the pandemic, according to recent reports by the World Bank. Bathuel, the local farmer, is distinctly unmoved by Nigeria's gas vision. She's heard it all before, she said. Alozi too has little hope that anything will change. She's afraid of raising her son here. It's more than just the impacts on farming and health. In recent decades, militant gangs have risen, protesting against the government and big oil companies, accusing both of environmental destruction and slow development that have seen youth go jobless. Sometimes the militants turn on each other. When fighting between gangs breaks out, women are rarely spared. Although claiming to protest environmental degradation, some of these gangs, mostly young, unemployed men from all over the Delta, sometimes break open pipelines to steal and cook crude oil themselves, setting up dangerous illegal refineries, adding to the sooty dust that often settles over River State and other Niger Delta states. Many people here say they have lost the will to fight or protest, resigned to an oily fate as protests against Ajip and Ibosha often yield little or end in violence. Bethuel blames the oil companies for fueling instability in the Niger Delta with what she calls their divide and rule tactic. Women here in particular have little say over their future or their land. They currently cannot hold positions of power in their communities, and they cannot inherit land on which they work, according to local laws. Only men are allowed on the Council of Chiefs, the group that speaks for the community, headed by a local traditional leader. It is the men who negotiate with big oil companies in the region, despite women often taking on more of the invisible work in the homes as food providers. Women have to be included in all decision-making processes in the Niger Delta. It is important. It is a must. You can't speak for me when I am not there, said Smart of Kabet Kashi, the women-focused NGO. If you want to know my problems, invite me and listen to me talk. Know where my pain is. Know where my anger is. The money they are taking is blood money. They are not better than Judas, says someone somewhere. For a long time, women collectives in the community have been pushing for the river state, government, and international oil companies like Egypt to equip them with vocational skills as farming proves less profitable. But so far, they say they've yet to see meaningful action. The Niger Delta is the goose that lays the golden egg, said one 54-year-old in Ebosha, a man who asked not to be named out of fear of reprisals. He blames the Nigerian government for profiting off of its own people's misery. If the goose dies, they don't care as long as the golden egg continues to come. And then he is the one that says the money they are taking is blood money. They are no better than Judas. Moving on from there, especially because our time is quickly running out. We have 7 minutes left. But yes, I did want to. I thought that story was important. These are the sorts of realities in the world we can just live in North America and pretend this stuff doesn't exist, but it does exist. Sometimes even here in America, in North America. But that's the shit that's happening in the world, and it's really shitty, and we need to look into that stuff. Anyway, Ilhan Omar blasts a Islamophobic letter from Jewish Democrats. This is a story again by Vice.com by Paul Bless on June 10th, 2021. A group of a dozen House Democrats, all of whom are Jewish, fired off a letter accusing Representative Ilhan Omar of deep-seated prejudice after Omar said that the U.S. and Israel, as well as Hamas and the Taliban, have committed atrocities. In turn, Omar blasted the signees of the letter for constant harassment and silencing and said the letter played on Islamophobic tropes. The episode is reopening a wound within the Democratic House caucus between pro-Israel liberals and the emerging group of progressives led by Omar, who are outspokenly critical of U.S. foreign policy and Israel. The latest iteration of a fight that's been brewing for more than 2 years started when Omar, one of two Muslim women ever elected to Congress, shared to Twitter an exchange she had with Secretary of State Antony Blinken during a House Foreign Affairs Committee hearing earlier this week. Omar's comments during the hearing centered around the Biden administration's opposition to recognizing the International Criminal Court as an arbiter of justice, particularly in the case of potential U.S. and Israeli war crimes. We must have the same level of accountability and justice for all victims of crimes against humanity, Omar tweeted, along with a clip of the exchange. We have seen unthinkable atrocities committed by the U.S., Hamas, Israel, Afghanistan, and the Taliban. Republicans and conservative media outlets pounced on the unthinkable atrocities comment, quote, but on Wednesday, a group of House Democrats led by Representative Brad Schneider joined in. Equating the United States and Israel to Hamas and the Taliban is as offensive as it is misguided, the Democrats wrote, adding that doing so discredits one's intended argument and at worst reflects a deep-seated prejudice. The United States and Israel are imperfect and, like all democracies, at times deserving of critique, but false equivalencies give cover to terrorist groups, they added. We urge Congresswoman Omar to clarify her words, placing the US and Israel in the same category as Hamas and Taliban. The Jewish Telegraphic Agency reported earlier on Wednesday that more than 2 dozen Jewish House Democrats took part in a call weighing whether or not to condemn Omar. Ultimately, 12 signed on, so half of them were like, yeah, no, we don't like this. In March 2019, the House passed a resolution condemning anti-Semitism and Islamophobia after Omar commented on the pro-Israel lobby's influence in the U.S. and was accused of anti-Semitism. The resolution ultimately passed and Omar herself voted for it. Omar fired back in her own set of tweets Wednesday night, accusing the Democrats of using Islamophobic tropes, such as accusing her of giving cover to terrorist groups. It's shameful for colleagues who call me when they need my support to now put a statement asking for clarification, not just call, Omar tweeted. The constant harassment and silencing from the signers of this letter is unbearable. And there's more to that story, but we're going to move on because we are out of time here. The far right anti-mask movement is coming for Republican governors. Watch how Republicans continue to attacking their own people just for showing any logic or common sense at all. Pretty much in this story by Vice.com by Cameron Joseph, June 10th, 2021. Ohio Republican Governor Mike DeWine sprang into action when COVID hit. He shut down large events weeks before other governors and scrambled to delay Ohio's primary and opted for a statewide mask mandate. All that effort to stop the spread enraged the right. After multiple moves by the state legislatures to reverse its decisions, DeWine is now facing potentially serious primary challenge. Former Ohio Congressman Jim Renacki, a close ally of former President Donald Trump, announced Wednesday that he'd challenged DeWine, hammering him for backing fear over freedom and blaming the governor for costing Ohio jobs from his COVID response. And a lot of people are behind this shit, and it's bullshit because you can just look at India and see what would have happened if he hadn't done shit like that. What a bunch of bullshit. He saved lives, and now he's suffering for it, and people are coming after him, and there's nothing he can do about it because the bad people are never held accountable, but the good people are held accountable for doing good things and for shit they don't do and for fucking bullshit, and like it's just nonstop. And this is a really long article, and you should read about it. But again, our time is up. Moving on from there, as Iran prepares to vote, its battered economy a major worry. This is some fascinating information about Iran that I thought was really interesting. You should check that out. Read it if you can. Remember, you can go to 99geek.ca and there are links to all these articles. You can read them for yourself. The final story, Hungary plans to ban promoting homosexuality to under 18s, which is bullshit and crazy. This is another story from City News and the Associated Press out of Budapest. And it's kind of fucked up. But that's Hungarians for you. They are fucked up, conservative assholes, and that's that. I'm half Hungarian, and it's sad to see the continued fall of my people into evil. Fuck them. Geeky blog. Okay, where to start? I still haven't bought a pack. That's 2 straight weeks now without a cigarette. Yay me. It's getting easier-ish, but only a little. Every night before going to bed is the worst. I just want to unwind with a smoke every time, but I know I can't. I have to be strong. Most of this week I spent just doing quests and WoW. There are certainly a lot of them. Finally yesterday I took a break from Warcraft to play some other stuff, just trying to keep myself distracted. I was contacted this morning about getting the vaccine. I'm going tomorrow for 12:50. That's why this is being done so late. I could have had this done before even the E3 shit started, but instead I almost went and got the vaccine today, and instead I'm going tomorrow for 12:50. I could have gone a day, as I said, but I'll be honest, I hate needles. I need at least a little time to prepare myself, psych myself up, tell myself what a big, strong, brave man I am. I am. I worried that my writing this month, literally it was like 11:30, and they were like, hey, at 12 o'clock you can get the vaccine. I'm like, maybe I'll do it tomorrow at 12? 12:50. Okay, cool. That sounds better. If it was 12:50 today even, but anyway, I worry that my writing this month isn't going well this month. Could be me not smoking, which of course just makes me want to smoke more. But so once I'm done here and maybe eat something and watch some E3, I'm going to put this whole weekend besides E3 into trying to iron out some of the kinks in the first 2 parts before I write week 3, see how that goes. There's been no comments that I know of, but as for the numbers here have been fine on the Patreon, but low but steady. Oh, my other patron figured out whatever issue and continued to subscribe. So now we're back to 2 subscribers after last week we lost a subscriber. My podcast numbers dropped, however, and I get such stress recording these podcasts every week, and not one listener has ever revealed themselves with any kind of review or saying anything on Twitter or anything. Not that any readers reveal themselves either. Honestly, I think my biggest hits come from my video game streams and TV opinions. Those are the things that bring in the most people, it seems. No one that reads my stuff ever comes forward either, but I'm never going to give up on my writing. I am, however, close to cutting back on things around here, and it will start with the podcast. I'm just going to cancel it at this rate. By the end of the month, it's doing nothing but wasting my time, and no one seems to care about it. And honestly, I don't think I'm very good at it anyway. I don't know how much value I brought to you in this podcast. I hope it's a lot. I want it to believe that it's a lot, but if people don't tell me it's a lot, then I don't know, and it feels like nothing, and I'm wasting my time, and I don't think I should do it anymore. And I'm sorry that I feel that way if you're there out there and you're enjoying this, but I don't know that you're out there. I can't know that you're out there. You're not letting me know. So yeah, because all I ever hear is how much of a shithole I am. I've already stopped posting the video edition on the Patreon. Maybe I just hate the way I sound. I don't know, but it's also too much clutter on the feed. Until I do cancel the podcast, which could be next week, if some people don't say anything to stop me, you can still find the videos on YouTube. They just won't be advertised about here. If I continue cutting back, I could end up cutting out the Geekly Weekly completely after that. With or without the support of an audience, I don't see myself ever completely giving up on my writing. And I will always play video games too. So those are two things that will probably never go away. I'll always be streaming video games somewhere, somehow, and I will always be doing my writing because that means a lot to me personally. Um, and I wish it would mean a lot to others as well, but it doesn't seem to. So those are not at risk of going anywhere. I'll be honest. But if you like the Geekly Weekly or like the video editions or audio editions of my stuff, you might want to finally start doing those things you've been considering, like subscribing on my Patreon, or at least letting your voice be heard. You don't need to pay money to be part of the Patreon community, chat and vote on polls, or leave reviews for the podcast or my books to attract more people. Any of these actions could end up saving the show. Otherwise, I could see no more podcasts by the end of the month. No more Geekly Weekly by the end of the summer, or maybe a truncated one with just TV rankings or something. But all that can change. I just need people to start showing their support and not leaving me here all alone feeling like I'm fucking garbage that people spit on and step on and ignore. Because in real life, that's all I'm surrounded with. In my shitty town of Hamilton where rent is cheap, everyone is conservative, everyone hates people like me. I am yelled at and outcast, and it sucks and it's shitty. And same with like my parents think I'm a horrible writer, and they outcast me and hate me. I have no friends. There's no one liberal around me who cares, or people make fun of me for having my everyone makes fun of me for having my pronouns on my Twitter feed. Those types of people are just all the people I know in the real world, and I need people in my life. There's reasons why I'm alone, and it's not because I'm a shitty person, I don't think, but everyone tells me that it is. And I mean, if you're out there listening to this and you think I'm a fine, normal person, I need people in my life. I need help because I'm alone. I don't know what to do. Like, seriously, there's no way out. I'm trapped.